You are listening to the best of the Stephen A. Smith and Ryan Ruocco Show on ESPNNewYork.com. Hear them weekday afternoons from 1 to 3 on ESPN New York 98.7 FM.
So let me set up the quote in case anybody does not know yet. And this is what Stephen's referring to. In an interview with the Tampa Tribune that was largely about Derek Brooks, Tony Dungy was asked about Michael Sam. And he said, quote, "I wouldn't have taken him," end quote, and then continued, "not because I don't believe Michael Sam should have a chance to play, but I wouldn't want to deal with all of it. It's not going to be totally smooth," and then in ellipses, "things will happen." And that is the quote, Stephen.
You know, I don't know what to be more ticked off about, to be quite honest with you. You know, whether it's the accusations of hypocrisy being aimed towards Tony Dungy, or whether it's the fact that we refuse or we embrace living in denial. That's where I'm stuck at with all of this, Ryan. Understand something here, Ryan. The gay community needs to just get over something real quick. And it's not popular to say everybody's scared and dancing around, tippy-toeing around the damn issues. It's really ticking me off. Because really what this comes down to is this. I want to emphasize this. And I'm in a position to say it because I have always been an advocate for gay rights. I don't believe they should be ostracized or tormented in any way that history has shown us that they have been ostracized and tormented. I don't believe they should be denied their civil liberties and civil rights. I believe in civil unions. I don't believe that somebody's in, you got a mate in the hospital and, you can't be treated like a spouse because that's what you are. I don't believe that they should be not denied the basic rights that any married couple would have. I don't believe in any of that. I have always been an advocate on their behalf in that regard. But it's one thing for people to be advocates of your rights as human beings. It's another thing entirely when you ask folks to like it totally. People have a right not to. Now let's take the quote from Tony Dungy, Ryan. And let's just go the religious route, because there are people that are making assumptions, even though he didn't allude to it in any way in his quote. There are people that are saying, well, the reason why he's articulating that point of view is because he's a devout Christian. Well, if he's a devout Christian, and you know him to be a devout Christian, and he's coming at you from a biblical perspective, is he not entitled to that belief, Ryan?
Sure, he's entitled to it.
He's entitled to it. He's entitled, whether you like it or not, he's entitled to that belief because it's based on his religion. Deal with it. If you're not a devout Christian, you've got nothing to say. The gay community could say something, and the devout Christians could say something. It's an argument and a debate between them. The rest of everybody else, mind your damn business. It's none of your business. But if it's outside of the religious portion of it, Ryan, and we're just taking his quote on face value, is it not true that there are going to be some people in an NFL locker room that are uncomfortable with a gay player? The answer to that is yes. Now, does that mean they get to mistreat him? They get to pull a Jonathan Martin on him? Or Richie Incognito, whichever way you want to use that. Does that mean that something like that should happen? No. Does that mean he should be ostracized or bothered or treated as less than what he is? No. But does somebody have the right to sit there and say, I'm really not trying to hang with him. That's not my cup of tea. Yes, they do. They do have that right. And he has to be a big enough boy to deal with it. The gay community has to be big enough to deal with it. And the rest of us have to understand it and hope that a maturation process kicks in with that particular individual or individuals who feel that way towards someone just because they're gay, hoping they'll grow out of it. Simple. It's not complicated. And then to bring this stuff up where you're talking about Tony Dungy and you're talking about hypocrisy on his part, which is the argument I got in with Skip Bayless on today's show on First Take.
Yep,
Skip's going to bring up Michael Vick and the distraction that he was. I said, no, Skip, it might have been a media distraction, but it's not a distraction for the players. Michael Vick was incarcerated for 18 months at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. He did his time. Once he did his time and he was allowed back into the league, the players inside the locker room simply had to sit there and say, yo, he did his time and the league let him back in, and that's what we have to deal with. There's nothing complicated about that. There's nothing you have to dance around there. But with Michael Sam, in this PC world that we're living in, you're going to have some people who are religious, others who are not but still are adamant against gays, and they're going to have to dance around those issues. And that's their problem. But it is certainly more complicated than Michael Vick.
Well, the only thing I'll say, though, Stephen, I understand the discrepancy you're trying to make. You're saying, hey, Michael Vick's teammates in the locker room weren't going to be they weren't going to be necessarily uncomfortable with him or distracted by his presence because of his past the way they might be
and not only that,
by
Ryan,
having a gay teammate.
And not only that, Ryan, it's easy to judge him because you can sit there and look at Michael Vick and say, yo, I don't like what he did. It was a criminal act. I ain't messing with him. Or you can sit there and exude forgiveness. But there's nothing to dance around. All I'm trying to say is that it's very concrete because he broke the law and had to serve hard time because of it. So what's convoluted about it? What's complicated about it?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that people just accept the law as it is and say if you broke it, I feel one way, and if you didn't, I feel another.
But Ryan, I'm just talking about in terms of complications. Yeah, in other words, it's not complicated. You could take a position or you could choose not to. But in the case of Michael Sam, you got to dance around that.
Yeah, but you know what, Stephen? The one thing I disagree with you about is I do think ultimately when it comes to distractions, usually what people are referencing is the way the media handles it. And I think that absolutely existed the same exact way for Michael Vick as it would exist for Michael Sam's teammates. Now, in principle, with Tony Dungy and what he said, I agree that people have made too much of a big deal out of it because basically I think what he was saying or trying to say, not as somebody spouting his religious views, but as somebody with a football hat on, I think he was probably trying to say, look, I don't think his talent is worth the added level of attention I have to give this player because of the way he's going to be covered. I think that's probably what he meant by it.
Maybe, Ryan, but again, what I'm saying to you is this. In Michael Vick's case, what were you going to say that was going to get you in trouble? If you sat there and said, look, man, I'm an animal lover. I can't forgive that. What's somebody going to say?
Yeah, but Stephen, they don't want to have to say anything. It's a distraction to them because they have to address it.
But what I mean by it is this. That depends on the player.
That always depends on the player.
But what if Stephen A. Smith was in the locker room? Me answering a question is a distraction?
No,
Am I going to have a problem answering the question?
No, but Stephen, but that's no different than if you are using that example, then there is no difference between Michael Vick and Michael Sam because you won't have a problem. Some people are going to have more difficulty answering one than the other, but nonetheless, they both provide the same distraction in the sense
I disagree.
That they have to answer questions from the media about it.
Because
that's the distraction.
You don't have to worry about the ramifications of your words with Michael Vick when he's fresh out of prison. What's going to happen to you if you, whatever you say, you either support him or don't, but what's going to happen to you? But Michael Sam, you say the wrong thing. You say the wrong thing, you could lose your career because of the Michael Sam situation.
You know what? You're right in the sense that if you came out against Michael Vick, you don't have to worry about being dragged through the mud publicly the way you would if you came out against Michael Sam. I agree with you on that sense. However, there was still worries for those guys. Michael Vick comes in as a star quarterback. You think the backup offensive lineman says something about how he's uncomfortable having a dog murderer in the room, that he might not be worried about losing his job because he's a lot more disposable to the team than the quarterback is?
No. That's an entirely different scenario because what happens is that if you don't have any kind of cachet and you're a backup, you always have to worry about how you carry yourself, the things that you're willing to say, how an organization will frown upon you. you because you're not that significant or important to them to be opening your mouth on that level. I'm saying all things being equal, Ryan, Michael Vick came out of prison. So the likelihood of you getting in trouble for any position that you took, either for or against him over the dogfighting scandal, did not harbor the same level of ramifications as it potentially could for Michael Sam, because it's not about Michael Sam. It's about a movement. It's about the gay community. It's about all the things, all the trials and tribulations that the gay community has had to go through to provoke and have progress implemented. And you can't have anybody in our society condoning in any way ostracizing them, insulting them, alluding to them needing to be held back from progressive movements, etc. It's an entirely different challenge is all I'm saying. So you can't compare the Michael Vick situation to Michael Sam. You just can't do it. And that's the excuse that people are using to point the finger of hypocrisy in the direction of a Tony Dungy instead of examining the veracity of his words. You've got people inside the locker room that could potentially cause far more problems with the Michael Sam situation than they ever would have dreamed of doing with the Michael Vick situation. And that is a fact.
You are listening to the best of the Stephen A. Smith and Ryan Ruocco Show on ESPNNewYork.com. Hear them weekday afternoons from 1 to 3 on ESPN New York 98.7 FM.
Stephen, you and I, we were able to get back to actual football yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful thing to do that, isn't it? To get to talk about this sport again. Oh,
it definitely is special, no doubt.
Well, today, SportsCenter is at Giants camp. Would you like to hear from the Giants quarterback, and what do you have to say? Would that make you happy just to hear his voice after this long offseason, Stephen?
I guess so.
You don't sound that excited.
Well, look. Eli, do your thing, baby. Do your thing.
Well, here was Eli. I thought this was interesting. Eli on the SportsCenter set just talking about the Giants' revamped wide receiver situation.
Akeem was a staple here for a long time and had great success, and so you're gonna miss his leadership, his knowledge, his playmaking ability he had in games. But I think with Ruben Randall coming into his third year, he had games last year where he played at a very high level. We just got him to be at that level every single game. I think Odell Beckham, a young guy. I think all these young receivers, you gotta pace them a little bit, but we're gonna throw him into the action. See what I think. He is a playmaker. I think he has great speed, and but it's gonna be a big training camp for him to see how much he can absorb, how much of the information he can learn. Where he's playing and he's playing confident. That's the thing about receivers. Sometimes they can be a little unsure what this route or what this adjustment is. You can't have any uncertainty out there. You got to be full speed, full throttle, and that's when they'll reach their potential.
You know what, Stephen? I love hearing that from Eli. I am so jazzed up about watching Odell Beckham Jr. play because I
want
feel
to see
like
what he's got.
Yeah, but skill position play. When you draft skill position guys early, I think that's always the most exciting players to watch for a fan because you can actually process what they're doing most easily. Probably, I'd say, or a quarterback, but. I really believe that the Giants receivers will be, even though they lose Nicks, I think they'll be significantly better this year than they were last year because that guy impersonating Hakeem Nicks was not Hakeem Nicks over the last 2 seasons.
Well, it was Hakeem Nicks coming off an injury. It was Hakeem Nicks trying to get through the season while staying healthy so he could position himself for a new contract. Didn't quite work out because not like he got a lucrative deal, but he's going to have an opportunity to prove that he can still go.
He's got to prove himself again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he got a 1 year prove me deal, but I feel like just getting him out of there can be a help too because now Ruben Randall knows, all right, this is my domain, and Odell Beckham Jr. is going to have a more defined role, and we already know what Victor Cruz brings to the table on a year in year out basis for the Giants. I feel like that unit now a couple of years ago when they won the Super Bowl, that unit was special the way Nicks and Victor performed that year, but. The last 2 years, it wasn't that with Hakeem hurt and then, like you said, distracted this past year. I am excited to see what they will be again this year in a new offense. So I'm looking forward to that. And also, Stephen, I want us to take a listen to Eli talking about Chris Snee, because too often in this sport, we overlook the contributions of offensive linemen. And Chris Snee, who retired yesterday, was a truly great player for this team for a decade. And he was a huge part of 2 Super Bowl championships. Yeah. And here was Eli talking about his loss and his impact.
You're going to miss that leadership and that experience that he has. And we have some new guys, some new veterans on the team, but we also have some starters who are young. So I think he was a kind of a great guy just to bring everybody together. I think it is fortunate that we at least had him for the spring and kind of got, that start with these guys, bring together as a group. But, right now that offense line, we're learning this together. It is a new offense. We're all coming in here at the same time, on the same page. We're talking a lot. Myself and the offense line communicating how they're going to make certain calls, what their calls are. We're making up our own words to make sure we're on the same page. And so I think that's important when you do. It's not that big of a deal when you have some new linemen if you're all coming in together, learning the same thing at the same time. We're all on the same level.
So, Steven, I look at the Giants and I look at the Jets. You expect both of them to be playoff teams this year?
No. I do not.
Really?
I do not. It wouldn't surprise me if both of them missed the playoffs. I don't think the Jets are talented enough. I really don't. I think their front seven can get it done, but I think their secondary is a huge question mark, and I still think Geno's a huge question mark. And I don't know about Michael Vick and how long he would last if he were in the lineup because he's been injury prone. So for me, I'm not sold on it. And in the case of the New York Giants, I think that offensive line still leaves a lot to be desired, even though, obviously there's nowhere to go but up. Their receiving corps seems solid. I think their question marks still exist at the running game. And I think, in terms of their defense, I definitely believe their secondary continues to need to improve. And I think that JPP is the key. 16.5 sacks to 6.5 sacks last season. I'm worried about them. And I don't think the wild card is coming out of each division. I think in order for either team to make the playoffs, they're probably going to have to win the division. And I don't see them doing it.
Thanks for listening to the best of the Stephen A. Smith and Ryan Ruocco Show on ESPNNewYork.com. Be sure to listen weekday afternoons from 1 to 3 on ESPN New York 98.7 FM.